Forget the nuclear codes. Forget the next pandemic. Forget whatever distraction the mainstream media is feeding you about the latest political scandal. Those are decoys. They are smoke grenades thrown to blind you from the executioner standing right behind you. While you were arguing about culture wars, the financial tectonic plates shifted. A signal was sent out. A silent command that no one in the West was supposed to hear until it was too late. Here is the only number that matters today: $340 billion. That is the amount of American debt China has quietly dumped since 2021. And they aren't alone. Japan is selling. Europe is selling. The Allies are fleeing the ship. For 80 years, the United States sold a lie called security. We told the world that buying our debt was the safest bet in history. But the casino is rigged, the house is broke, and the biggest whales at the table are cashing out their chips. When the buying stops, the dying begins. This isn't a recession. This isn't a market correction. This is a mathematical impossibility colliding with reality. And when the dust settles, you aren't just going to lose your savings. You are going to lose your future. Look at your bank account right now. Look at the price of fuel. Look at the grocery receipt that seems to double every 6 months while your paycheck stays the same. Do you feel that tightening in your chest? That constant, low-level anxiety that you are running on a treadmill that is speeding up, just seconds away from throwing you off? You aren't crazy, and you aren't unlucky. You are being targeted. The inflation eating your life isn't an accident of nature. It is the direct result of a war being fought in boardrooms you will never enter, by men whose names you will never know. They told you the economy was recovering. They lied. They told you the debt doesn't matter. They lied. Right now, the United States is drowning in $33 trillion of debt. But that number is too big to understand, isn't it? Let's make it personal. Let's put the gun right against your temple. In 2020, your share of that debt, every man, woman, and child, was $80,000. But the interest, the VIG you pay to the loan shark, is spiraling out of control. Projections show that in the next decade, just the interest on this debt will cost $40,000 per citizen. Not to pay it off, just to keep the lights on. That is your labor being stolen before you even wake up in the morning. It is a silent tax levied on your existence, extracted through the devaluation of the currency you trade your life for. This video is the autopsy of a murder that is happening in slow motion. We are going to expose the mechanism of the trap. We are going to show you why the smart money is running for the exits and why they left you holding the bag. If you want to understand why you are poor and how to survive the crash they engineered, you need to watch every second of this briefing. Subscribe now if you want to see the matrix code, because once you see it, you can never go back to sleep. To understand the weapon, you must understand the battlefield. For nearly a century, the United States played the role of the world's bank. It was the ultimate geopolitical hustle. We printed paper, and the world gave us cars, electronics, and oil. Why? Because the US Treasury bond was considered the safe haven. It was the financial bedrock of the planet. If the world was on fire, you bought US debt because Uncle Sam always pays his bills. But in warfare, the most dangerous moment is when your greatest strength becomes your fatal weakness. The enemies of the dollar figured it out. They realized they didn't need to fire missiles to destroy America. They just needed to stop buying the paper. The offensive began in silence. China, the second largest holder of our debt, initiated the Great Dump. Since 2021, they have offloaded over $340 billion. This isn't portfolio rebalancing. This is strategic abandonment. Then, the second front opened. Japan, our supposed greatest economic ally in the Pacific, sold $200 billion. Think about that. The two biggest lenders to the United States are demanding their money back. But the betrayal goes deeper. It's not just the rivals. It's the friends. The United Kingdom, Germany, Canada. They are all quietly stepping back, hands raised, refusing to buy more of the toxic asset that is the US dollar. Why? Because trust is the only currency that matters. And the United States has spent the last 15 years burning that trust like firewood in a winter storm. But there is a catalyst the news won't touch: the weaponization of the finance system. When the US froze Russian assets in 2022, a chill went down the spine of every central bank in the global south. The message was clear: if you cross Washington, your money is ours. Suddenly, US debt wasn't a safe haven. It was a hostage situation. China saw this. Saudi Arabia saw this. They realized that holding US debt was holding a grenade with the pin pulled by someone else. So, the great unwinding began. They aren't just selling for profit, they are selling for sovereignty. Let's pause. Rewind the tape. Does this smell like smoke to you? Because we have been here before. Go back to 2008. The housing crisis. The banks gambled with your money, lost it all, and then held a gun to the head of the American taxpayer demanding a bailout. Too big to fail. Remember that phrase? The Emergency Economic Stabilization Act printed $700 billion to save the criminals who burned down the house. Then came the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, another $831 billion. Between 2008 and 2020, the national debt grew by 30%. They told you it was necessary. They told you it was stimulus. Does this sound familiar? It's exactly what is happening today, but on a scale that makes 2008 look like a lemonade stand bankruptcy. Back then, they could hide the damage because interest rates were at zero. Money was free. They could kick the can down the road. But today, the road has ended. The cliff is here. We are seeing the same arrogance, the same denial, and the same looting of the Treasury. But this time, the credit card is maxed out, and the lenders are cutting the line. The banking collapses we saw recently, Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, those were tremors. The earthquake is coming. In 2008, it was about bad mortgages. In 2025, it is about bad sovereign debt. The asset that is failing isn't a house in Florida. It is the credit of the United States government itself. Then came the accelerant, the pandemic. In the blink of an eye, $5 trillion was added to the ledger. $5 trillion. For the first time since the desperate days of World War II, our debt eclipsed 100% of our GDP. We owe more than we make. In any household, in any business, this is called insolvency. In Washington, it's called Tuesday. But here's the twist. Here is the knife in the gut. The cost of carrying this debt has exploded. We are now paying $3 billion every single day just in interest. Let that sink in. $3 billion. Every day. Burned. Vanished. Giving you zero value. No roads, no schools, no healthcare. Just interest payments to the bankers. The interest on the debt is now larger than the entire U.S. military budget. We spend more paying off bondholders than we do on the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines combined. The greatest military machine in human history has been defeated not by a hypersonic missile, but by compound interest. This is a mathematical death spiral. To pay the interest, we have to borrow more. It is a Ponzi scheme of global proportions. And who pays for this? You do. The U.S. government is now spending 18% of all tax revenue just to service this debt. That's nearly double what France or the UK spends. We are a deadbeat nation, walking around in a Gucci suit, paying for dinner with a credit card that was declined 3 transactions ago. So, what happens when the world stops buying? What happens when China and Japan say no more? It's basic supply and demand. But the consequences are lethal. When they sell U.S. debt, they are selling U.S. dollars. The market is flooded with greenbacks nobody wants. When supply exceeds demand, value crashes. A weak dollar sounds abstract until you realize that America doesn't make anything anymore. We import $4 trillion in goods every year. We import 25% of our manufactured goods. We import 20% of our food. When the dollar crashes, the price of everything you need to survive skyrockets. This isn't just inflation. This is hyperinflationary depression. Fuel, electronics, medicine, food. The supply chain crisis you saw a few years ago, that was a preview. When the dollar loses its reserve status, those ships stop coming. Or worse, they arrive, but you can't afford what's inside the containers. The standard of living in the West is built on the subsidy of cheap imports paid for with printed money. When that subsidy ends, reality crashes through the front door. If the world rejects our debt, the dollar collapses. And when the dollar collapses, your standard of living reverts to the 1930s. Look at Venezuela. Once the richest nation in South America. They had oil. They had wealth. They had security. But they depended on one commodity, and they lost the confidence of the markets. When the investors stopped buying their debt, the printing press started whirring. Hyperinflation didn't happen overnight. It crept in. First, the coffee got expensive. Then the bread. Then, the money became trash. Does this sound familiar? The skeptics will scream. But America isn't Venezuela. We are the reserve currency. That is the most dangerous arrogance of all. Rome fell. The British Empire fell. The Soviet Union fell. No empire has a divine right to exist forever. The euro, the pound, the yen, they are all mathematically tied to the dollar. If the dollar falls, it drags the entire Western financial system into the abyss. It is a suicide pact, and the rest of the world knows it. That is why they are building lifeboats. Look at the central banks. They are buying gold at a pace we haven't seen in 50 years. Why gold? Because gold is the only asset that isn't someone else's liability. Gold doesn't need a government to validate it. China, Russia, India, they are dumping dollars and stacking bullion. They are preparing for a post-dollar world. They are building a parallel financial system, a BRICS currency backed by real commodities, not empty promises. Are you? Money is imaginary. Resources are real. And this is where the financial war turns into a physical siege. While American politicians were arguing about pronouns, China was securing the periodic table. Let's talk about tungsten. You don't think about it, but your life depends on it. It has the highest melting point of any metal. It is essential for semiconductors, aerospace technology, and, most importantly, ammunition. You cannot fight a modern war without tungsten. You cannot build a missile without tungsten. You cannot penetrate armor without tungsten. Here is the terrifying reality. There are 0 operational tungsten mines in the United States. 0. Who controls it? China. They control 70% of global production. They control 90% of the processing capacity. We have spent decades outsourcing our survival to our greatest adversary to save a few pennies on the dollar. Recent export restrictions from Beijing were a warning shot. They are tightening the noose. Imagine a scenario where the US dollar collapses and simultaneously, the supply chain for our defense industry is cut off. We wouldn't just be broke. We would be defenseless. Our aircraft carriers would be floating museums. Our missile silos would be empty tubes. This is the vulnerability strategy. They hold our debt, and they hold the raw materials needed to build the weapons to defend ourselves. Checkmate. The strategic blindness is staggering. While we focused on financial engineering, moving numbers on a screen, our rivals focused on physical engineering. They dug mines. They built refineries. They secured the atoms that make the modern world function. Now, they are closing the fist. So is there a way out? Is there a hero coming to save us? Let's look at the solutions. Option 1. Cut spending. You hear this all the time. We need to balance the budget. Let's do the math. The Doge initiative, led by Elon Musk, managed to identify about $40 billion in savings as of March 2025. That sounds like a lot of money, right? Wrong. $40 billion covers the interest on our debt for 10 days. 10 days. Even if they manage to slash $1 trillion from the budget, an impossible political feat that would cause riots in the streets, it would only cover 1 year of interest payments. To actually fix this, you would have to abolish the military, Social Security, and Medicare tomorrow. All of it. Gone. It is politically impossible. No politician will sign their own death warrant. The moment austerity hits, the civil unrest begins. They know this. Option 2. Print the money. This is the path of least resistance. The Federal Reserve can print infinite dollars to buy the debt that China and Japan are selling. This is called yield curve control, a fancy term for monetizing the debt. But this is the suicide pill. If the Fed becomes the only buyer of U.S. debt, the illusion of a market is destroyed. It signals to the world that the dollar is worthless confetti. It triggers immediate, catastrophic hyperinflation. It destroys the safe haven status instantly. It creates a feedback loop of doom where the more they print, the more people sell, and the more they have to print. There is no door number 3. And this is where the sinister endgame comes into focus. When the dollar collapses, they won't just shrug and apologize. They will offer a solution. A new dollar. A central bank digital currency, CBDC. Programmable money. Money they can turn off if you protest. Money that expires if you don't spend it. The collapse of the old debt system is the perfect pretext to usher in a system of total financial surveillance. The crisis isn't the accident. The crisis is the Trojan horse. We are staring down the barrel of the great default. It might not be an explicit default where the president goes on TV and says, "We aren't paying." It will be a soft default. They will pay the debt, but they will pay it in dollars that are worth pennies. They will inflate the debt away. They will steal your purchasing power to save their system. The events of 1929 created the Great Depression. The events of 1971, leaving the gold standard, created the era of endless inflation. The event happening right now, the global rejection of US debt, is creating the end of the American financial hegemony. The system isn't breaking, it is working exactly as designed. It is designed to transfer wealth from the workers to the asset holders, from the savers to the debtors, from you to them. The bond market is screaming. The allies are fleeing. The raw materials are locked down. The silence you hear? That's the sound of the tide going out before the tsunami hits. Now you see the truth. The ledger is bleeding. The game is over. The question is no longer, will it happen? The question is, where will you be when it does? You cannot stop the global sell-off. You cannot force China to buy our debt. You cannot print more tungsten. But you can wake up. Most people will sleepwalk into this slaughter. They will blame the president or the other party or bad luck. But you know better now. You know that paper promises are burning. You know that real assets, gold, land, skills, knowledge, are the only lifeboats left. This channel, Beyond the Ledger, is your intelligence agency in this war. We don't just report the news, we decode the signal. Share this video, not for the algorithm, but because you have friends and family who are still asleep. They are planning vacations while the roof is caving in. Send this to them. Be the one who warned them. The system is deleting the middle class. Don't let them delete you. We are watching the collapse of an empire in real time. History is being written in red ink. Stay vigilant. Trust nothing but what you can verify. I'll see you on the other side.